Matthew-Grasso. I've been a musician most of my life, I guess nearly 40 years. I think by the time I was 6 years of age, I recognized kind of an innocent love, I guess, for music. I can remember listening to like Beatle albums my parents were listening to or whatever it might be, and I would react quite emotionally to the sound, like the sound deeply moved me for some reason or another. As both my parents, on some level, played the guitar and they sang folk songs around the home growing up. And I think hearing live music growing up, I think it's kind of a slightly different experience than only listening to music that is just recorded. I remember seeing the guitar around all the time, and so it was something familiar in my mind as to what it looked like and what it could potentially do. By the time, before my 12th birthday, I conceptualized the need for a guitar. And I remember asking for a guitar on my 12th birthday. And when I held the guitar in my hand, like I knew, like at that moment, like that's what I was put on this earth to do, was to play the guitar. I didn't really see the bigger picture, of course, which would come maybe a decade or so later, but one thing I knew was that I just wanted to make sounds and I wanted to express myself, and I began my journey there. I think by the time I was about 13 or 14, I had heard classical music for the first time, which I'd never really heard much of, and really kind of fell in love with the sound of the violin in particular. Started playing violin around the same time as well, around when I was about 14. For the next 4 years or so, I would try to master, shall we say, the guitar and violin. Of course, I was highly interested in composition. I was always writing music as well. Had opportunities to play with many different community orchestras, still performing in rock bands, but basically primarily self-taught. So after high school, I went to go study at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, where my whole world would, ultimately change in what I thought music was and what I had to live up to and so forth. When I was first there, I realized that there was so much that I had to rework in my own playing, and so much that I had to, rethink, reevaluate, and I just wasn't really quite there. So that first semester was actually kind of a little bit defeating on a level for me. I almost felt like I wasn't really cut out to be a musician, which was kind of funny looking back on it. But after that first semester, things started to make more sense to me, and then the rest of my studies went quite well. And I took advantage of all sorts of opportunities during my time at the conservatory. About a year later, I learned about the Ali Akbar College of Music, in which the late Sarod Master Ali Akbar Khan Sahib had his school there, and I thought what a wonderful opportunity to go study North Indian classical music. I didn't really know exactly why. I was just interested, and I felt like I was kind of pulled to go there to learn, and so I spent many years learning North Indian music. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do at that time with it. I was just fascinated by the music and was completely in love. But I guess I was really interested in improvising, composing, exploring new musical systems. Eventually it would lead to the creation of my different guitars and kind of changing the whole set of parameters on what I thought I was the guitar could do or couldn't do. Being born into a family that, when I guess by the time I was maybe a teenager, kind of fully realized that my Uncle Dave played guitar, Mom and Dad played a little bit, and even Uncle Calvin, great-great-uncle Calvin, played classical guitar. When I was 14, I had a chance to meet my great-great-uncle, and he was in his 60s maybe, and he just said he had arthritis, couldn't play, but he had given me all these classical guitar books, like, volumes and volumes of books, and And he actually came out to see me once or twice play at the conservatory, which was kind of nice. But it was interesting to just kind of see that there was something, I guess, just in the DNA alone in our family where people, they played music. And somehow it always seemed like the guitar was the instrument that seemed to be common for many generations, even going back to great Uncle Calvin, who was, a hobbyist classical guitarist. I think for me, music is definitely a spiritual path. When I met my Indian music guru, Ali Akbar Khan, he talked about music as Nada Brahma, which means like sound is God. And it was kind of something that just really made a lot of sense to me. I mean, after like 10 years of playing, I didn't really know why I was really playing. I just felt like I had to play and I was just doing it. But I hadn't really thought consciously like why, other than I was just kind of in love with playing. But when he said that, music is like a spiritual practice, music can become your own religion, you can sit down and play or pray anywhere you want in your temple of sound, that made the most sense to me. I could never really buy into orthodox kind of religious beliefs, although I certainly would respect them, but it just made the most sense. So when people ask me like, well, what religion are you? I just say, my religion is music. And that's what I still believe to this day, and it makes the most sense to me. Being a guitarist, of course, you're brought up to believe that the guitar has 6 strings, and you work within those parameters, and you go with it. It just seemed that although I was slightly aware that some guitars actually had more than 6 strings, I had never really thought about the idea of actually playing it. I met a man on the sidewalk named James Klein. I was sitting in front of a guitar store I wanted to go to, and it was like 10 or 15 minutes before they would open up. I walk in, and a mutual friend of ours said, hey, you guys know each other? And we're like, no. He's like, should we? He's like, you both should. You're both like very good guitarists. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And so he says, my name is James Klein. And he said he played an 11-string guitar. And I was like, oh, really? So we exchanged CDs. I gave him my 6-string guitar CDs, and he gave me his 11-string guitar CDs. And I went home and I played his 11-string guitar. I was like, wow, that's like really amazing. And that it was really like something that I had been like thinking about. Like there was something I wanted to change. I just didn't know what. But hearing his guitar really got me thinking in a very different way. And then I invited him over to stay with us, actually. And he gave a concert and a master class for my students. And he tried to convert me to his 11-string guitar. And I said, I don't know, Jim. I couldn't find the low E string on it. I found I was like lost in the sea of strings. I just kind of pushed it away. And I said, I respect what you do. It's beautiful. But then I just told him that, I can't play 11-string guitar. Then many months later, I realized if I add 1 string, I can have all this extra range and possibilities, and it would make sense in my brain. And then that's what started the 7-string guitar journey. And after many years of playing the 7-string guitar, creating new repertoire, then I felt like the next thing to fix was the raga music that I loved so much. I knew that you couldn't play raga music on a tempered scale, and you needed more strings. And so that's when I worked with Scott Richter initially to design the first Indian raga guitar, 25 strings. And I think for me, being a composer, I think every composition of mine is like a journal entry. Some people like to write in journals. It's something I just don't do. But for me, when I go back and visit a composition that's like 25 years old or 20 years old, it brings me back to that point in my life, the feelings that what I was going through as a person and where I was at just mentally and spiritually. And it's really quite a beautiful journey. And I think that's what's very interesting about it to me now, being a little bit older, is watching, especially my youngest son, Mian, play a lot of these pieces and and to just kind of think about, how much time has really gone by, and to see the next generation playing, and it's really quite a kind of a beautiful thing to witness, and really kind of a special thing, I think, to witness. I think to be able to see your own offspring kind of playing your music, and perhaps maybe carrying on a tradition in that sense. I love the idea with music somehow that there's this ability for them to relate in a more direct way, even though their fundamental differences are there. There was just something about having the opportunity to have studied rock, metal, then going on to classical music, then going on to a little bit of jazz, and then North Indian music, and then trying to respect what those traditions are and to keep their language clear, but at the same time find a way that you can bridge the gap and synthesize them to create new musical compositions or improvisations and so forth. And I think that's something one of my teachers, Dusan Bogdanovich, kind of imparted to me, was that idea about the idea of synthesis and resynthesis of musical forms and styles and so forth, but being respectful to what they are originally.